The US has many critics around the world, but you believe this is America's moment, don't you?
Meaning?
This is America's time, if America wanted to step up to the plate.
Yeah, I think it's all. I don't think it's about America. I mean, I think this is a real moment in time where it is possible, if we want to be the first generation that says no to extreme poverty. And by extreme poverty, we mean, stupid poverty. Kids dying for lack of food in their belly in the 21st century, or whatever it is, 3,000 Africans, mostly children, dying every day of a mosquito bite. That is ridiculous. And history has a way of looking, as I said earlier, as a way of making things that looked acceptable once appear ridiculous now. This is that moment. And, other ages they had, you could pull back apartheid, or there was the fight for equality and civil rights in the United States that defined the 60s and 70s. This is our shot at greatness. Other ages had the chance to put a man on the moon. I spoke to Bush about that, and just said, look, that was a great demonstration of financial prowess and intellectual genius, really, putting a man on the moon. I said, we're not asking you to put a man on the moon here, Mr. President, and it'll cost a lot less to bring mankind back to Earth, so to speak, and be that generation that just says, no, we're not going to have that. We want to have our beaches and our Barbies. We want to, go to our rock shows. We all have a fantastic life, and no one has a greater life than a spoiled, rotten rock star like myself. But I can't really enjoy it the way I'd like to, knowing that this this kind of hemorrhaging of human life could be stopped and isn't being stopped. And I think, in a way, we shouldn't be blaming the politicians, because it's really, we have to give them permission to spend what is, in the end, our money. So in Australia's case, and in fact, Europe, everywhere, we're asking for 0.7% of GDP. That's what it'll take to stop this. That's less than 1%. I don't know an Australian that I've met in the last week that isn't up for that. It's 0.7. Now you're at 0.28, I think, now. And there's talk of increasing by 2010. I would say if you get to 0.5 by 2010, you could be very proud as a nation. That's what I would. There's a white paper coming, I think, on April 26th. We're optimistic about that, but push and push and push. Because you may think, well, it's just Australia. Australia's just one piece of the puzzle. Wrong. Everyone looks at everyone else. I know this. I've been in Gleneagles with Bob, running around the golf course, during the G8 meetings. And everyone wants to know what everyone else is doing. And even if Australia wasn't in Gleneagles, the Canadians are looking at Australia. So this is a critical moment. And if you go to 0.5 by 2010, I think that's like 11 million people would have access to clean water. 18,000 deaths avoided to AIDS and TB. And these are real lives, real numbers, and what an opportunity to be able to do that. So, look, everyone knows how I feel about Australia, but you have to give the politicians, whoever's in power, permission to do this.
Have you spoken to John Howard about this?
I haven't, and I'd like to when we get back.
Will there be that opportunity? If he'll have you? Have you asked?
I haven't yet, no.
How's that set up? Your people approach his people and hopefully it happens?
Kind of like how we met.
Yeah. That was in a bed, we can't talk about that.
That's right. No, I mean, it's this, you do get the feeling, right, in Australia that, there's this is a new model. Somewhere happening down here, there's something going on, new society is being dreamt up. So, and you're doing really well. It's an amazing, even just coming back here, having not played over 8 years, you can see there's a prosperity, the way people walk, it's a confidence. Now, with that, you should be the opportunity to lead the world outside of this hemisphere, to actually just to take some moral high ground. You can afford to now. And so I don't want to be a boring arsehole and just go, well, actually...
you say this to every country you visit.
That's that. The only other country I think has the chance in leadership in terms of creating a new model as Australia would be Canada. And I'd argue similarly with the Canadians.
You talk about Glen Eagles, and that seemed like a great moment where there was a commitment to help the world's poorest nations. But 6 months on, the World Bank and the IMF still hadn't actually cancelled any debt. You talked in December about you were gutted that the World Trade Organization hadn't taken the opportunity to create fairer trading conditions for the poorest nations. Can politicians actually be trusted?
Actually, we're getting there, you know. I mean, on the debt stuff, we really are getting there. And it's astonishing. I don't allow myself sometimes, you know, to stop or ourselves to think about these things. But there'll certainly be about, in this present round, we'll get to about 50 countries who will have a complete brand new start out of this initiative. And that is really, really incredible. And I've seen what debt monies can do. Like in Uganda, nearly 3 times the amount of children are going to school. That's what that means. Because debt cancelling is kind of unsexy concept. I mean, it's hard to describe, but that's what it means. So they're coming through on that. On the AIDS front, as I told you, you know, there's movement. Now we're still losing the war on AIDS, but there has been breakthroughs.
The easy dismissal of you and Bob Geldof and others is that you're celebrity activists or whatever it is. I don't think a lot of people understand the hard yards you've had to do to learn your subject and to sell the argument. Can you give us an insight into those early days when you had to study and then you had to work Capitol Hill and you had to work the corridors of power?
Well, I hate losing. You know, I mean, it's probably as kind of venal, I just hate losing. And that's why I'm attracted to, you know, I'm attracted to people who win, you know. Right now we're working on an AIDS emergency thing in the commercial world. So we're getting Nike involved, we're getting Armani involved, getting American Express involved. And these are people who are winners, if you like. They're people who are better than I am at getting your attention, the public's attention. But to answer your question, the first fence that we could fall at was just not knowing the subject. So I enrolled in Harvard University, essentially, all but physically enrolled under a professor there called Jeffrey Sachs. And I went to him. I wanted to know before we took on this fight that we could win it, that it was possible to win. And he took me through the numbers, and that was helpful. I then went to visit a lot of conservative economists because I wanted to know the downside of the argument. I then went to visit the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. There was a man there called Les Gelb, and it had a very dramatic kind of atmosphere because he'd lost his voice. And he said, I'm going to give you the names of 46 people who can stop you. I hope you have some time on your hands. And he gave me the names of bankers, media barons, foreign appropriators, and I pretty much worked through the list, from Nelson Rockefeller to Robert Rubin, who was the Treasury Secretary in the United States, to Paul Volcker, the legendary Reaganomics head of the Fed. I mean, I just went to everyone. And of course, they'd have the meetings with me just out of curiosity.